Welcome to the educational session for the gum elastic bougie. The official name for the gum elastic bougie is an endotracheal tube introducer. The gum elastic bougie is a blue plastic stylet that's approximately 60 centimeters long, and at the distal tip there is a 30-degree angle that is aimed anteriorly. There are two indications for utilizing the gum elastic bougie. The first is when you can see the vocal cords, but you cannot pass the endotracheal tube through the cords. The second indication is when you cannot visualize the vocal cords. You have the laryngoscope in the mouth, and all you can see is the epiglottis. There are two relative contraindications to using a gum elastic bougie. The first is a potential tracheal injury, and the second is a potential laryngeal injury. The risk that you run is exacerbating these potential injuries. But you have to keep in mind the risk of not obtaining an airway with the relative risk of exacerbating one of these injuries. To place the gum elastic bougie, there are 7 steps that should be followed. The first step is to identify the epiglottis and maintain the laryngoscope in place. This is the technique that you've been using all along for direct laryngoscopy. The second step is to place the gum elastic bougie through the vocal cords. There are 3 important steps to take when placing the gum elastic bougie through the cords. The first is to make sure that the angled tip is pointed anterior or towards the front of the patient. Make sure that you do not allow the gum elastic bougie to rotate out of this anterior position. And thirdly, excessive force is not advised, and if you do run into excessive force, you are likely hitting the vocal cords and just need to move to the left or right a centimeter or so. The third step is to confirm placement in the trachea. There are 3 ways to do this. The first is to palpate and listen for audible clicks. These clicks represent the distal tip of the bougie hitting the tracheal rings. An assistant or yourself can palpate these. The second step to confirming placement in the trachea is to feel for resistance. If you are in the trachea, you will not be able to insert the bougie further than 40 centimeters without hitting resistance. Contrast this with esophageal intubation with the gum elastic bougie. You will not hear any clicks if you are in the esophagus, and you will be able to advance the bougie further than 40 centimeters without hitting resistance. Once you've confirmed the placement in the trachea, the next step is to place the endotracheal tube over the gum elastic bougie. You want to make sure to keep the direct laryngoscope in place, and you want to maintain security on the bougie while inserting the endotracheal tube over top of the bougie to the typical distance that you've predetermined. At this time, while maintaining the security of the endotracheal tube, withdraw the gum elastic bougie from the patient's trachea. The last step is to confirm endotracheal tube placement in the trachea via typical confirmation techniques. One last pointer that I have for you deals with what to do when the vocal cords are very, very anterior. And despite using the bougie, you still can't seem to get that distal tip into the vocal cords. What you want to do is follow along the curvature of the hard and soft palate or the roof of the mouth, and you want to really insert the bougie following along this curvature. So with your index finger, really follow along the roof of the mouth and help facilitate that distal tip going anterior into the vocal cords. What that does is when you follow along that curvature, what it does to the distal tip is it really increases that angle up into the vocal cords, and it can help facilitate those very, very difficult intubations. So with your index finger, really follow along the roof of the mouth and help facilitate that distal tip. So this is it right there. I hope this review on the Gum Elastic Bougie was helpful. If you think of any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to email me at ejcortez@columbus.gov, and you can always call or text my cell phone number 419-377-8823.